After crashing, again, I work on the usual. Burner drills into furnaces, handcraft research for automation, and military research. I make this horrible hand-fed guy again for automation science, and then get mauled to death while peacefully chopping some trees. And realize that my armory is too small to get my revenge. Not letting that slide, however, I craft the mighty shotgun and kill my first biter nests. With the troublesome neighbors out of the way, it's time for some expansion. These little hand-fed setups work, but I do not like them. So, I quickly get to work setting up my first furnace deck, allowing me to have a full yellow belt of output of both copper and iron plates. And, with the yellow belt of copper and iron, it is quite simple to set up red science, and so I do. Of course using the same design I always do. I would explain the science more thoroughly, but I make a few horrendous lapses in judgment later this episode, so I will wait till later to do that. Also, just look at it. It's pretty simple. And green science is also quite simple. Just a few more intermediates, but it's just copper and iron, so no big deal. Next up, I make a steel furnace deck. I was originally considering making it also output a yellow belt, until I realized that that would take 192 furnaces just for that. So instead, I just made it the same size as the others. Steel is important, not only because of all the future sciences that require it, but also because it's needed to make upgraded buildings. Assembling machine 2 needs steel. Steel furnace, steel. Literally everything to do with oil, steel. So having a good production now will be very good. And so I handcraft hundreds of inserters, because I guess automated crafting isn't real. But the biters are very real, and very annoying, so I make this little area to make engines and bullets, and run off to blow up some more nests. With those engines, I also handcraft some tracks and a locomotive, as it is now train time. Trains in 2.0 are quite different. They bend different, they're more customizable, and they're a bit stranger. However, I'm just running a simple track down to the oil patch, as oil is quite helpful. And quite tasty. While driving down, however, I noticed some biters were directly in the path, and so I asked them to move out. And I bulldozed their homes. And, once the oil was set up, it was letting off some curious fumes that I knew the biters would not take kindly to. And so, I drove off to show them who was boss, crashed into a nest, and was swiftly mauled to death. And, once the oil was set up, it was letting off some curious fumes that I knew the biters would not take kindly to. And while I could try and fight them in my car, I decided to just place some gun turrets between them and my oil for now, as being mauled to death does not sound pleasant right now. Heading back to base, I quickly get to work setting up military science, as it should help me keep those biters off my land. Military science uses stone and steel, but is otherwise nothing super new, so it goes up pretty quick. With military science in the labs, I can research flamethrower turrets. These little nozzles take just a bit of oil as input and output a flaming geyser that turns any biter that gets too close straight into ash. So of course, I instantly run down to the oil outpost and give its defense a substantial upgrade. Between the walls and the flamethrowers, this place will be safe for the foreseeable future. And, while I am for some reason unable to automate belts and inserters, I do make a garbage flamethrower automation, as having some on hand will be nice in the future. And by the future, I mean right now, as I would like to never see a biter near my stuff ever again. And so, I begin a wall around the main factory, which should keep it quite safe. That only counts once it's up though, and the biters make sure to give me plenty of reminders while building the wall as to why it needs to be here. But, after a while, it is up, and I shouldn't have to worry about the biters, at least for a good long while. And so, while I have time, it is time to make blue science. Once again, not going into detail on purpose, because reasons. So, engines, advanced circuits, sulfur, and then blue science. Pretty simple, but a bit of a step up from military. After that, I decide that while steam power is okay, I want something better. So I go up to the uranium patch I enclosed while building the wall and start mining uranium. While it does take sulfuric acid to mine uranium, it isn't that hard to just make some nearby. Handcrafting 10 centrifuges, I can set up basic uranium processing up there as well. And, using the ability to filter inserters, I make it so it will place the good and bad uranium in separate boxes, and then using some curious inserter and belt configurations, can place the two types of processed uranium on opposite sides of the belt, to then be brought down to be made into fuel cells. And then, just a bit too much handcrafting later, I have everything to make my own nuclear reactor. And yes, I did design it myself, and it works! I do add more steam tanks later, however, as the 4 I originally added couldn't store 4 nuclear reactors worth of steam. These lights, however, were perfect from the start. With the nuclear reactor working, I quickly dismantle my steam power, as it's just a waste of coal now. Speaking of dismantling, you remember when I said I made some silly, or even brain-dead decisions this video? Well, here's the first one. Dismantling pretty much the whole factory. Now, you may be asking, Lucy, why would you do that? Are you a fool? Perhaps even a biter in disguise? Well, no. What happened was that I thought to myself, with a blue science handled, I could build a better base. A real base. However, what I forgot to take into account was my own laziness. The absolute stupidity of what I just did aside, however, the next thing I did was a good idea. Using the now free materials, I got to work automating robots and roboports, which are quite nice, and should help me rebuild a base. However, after making them, I decide to try out quality modules. So of course, I handcraft a bunch, and shove them into all the machines. I quickly learn, however, that quality ingredients do not work at all how I expected. See, I thought that if I had quality ingredients, they would be used in a normal recipe, and would just increase the chance of a quality output. This is, however, not how it works at all. Instead, when you have a quality ingredient, it is effectively a unique item, and can only be used in special recipes to make items of the same quality as itself. And so, with quality modules and everything, I have to make boxes scattered around the production line just to keep the higher quality items from jamming my belts. Despite this, however, the quality items I got are quite nice. Quality robots have a much larger battery life, so I don't have to worry as much about them running out all the time. Around this point, setting up roboports around the walls, I realized that dismantling the base was really stupid. Oh, and also, my initial ore patches are getting quite low. Due to this, I'm gonna need to fight more biters, as they are not going to just let me have more resources. So I start making explosives, and I start making flamethrower ammo, and I make a tank. With all 3 ammo types automated, it's time to fight more biters. After my great idea of removing the whole base the first time, my new idea is to do it again. I remove everything this time, even the furnace stacks. And that is because I'm about to commit the laziest act that you've probably ever seen in a Factorio video. Instead of making a new starter base, I'm just gonna run over to my dangerous world from last episode and just copy-paste the whole thing right into the walls. Yup, I just grabbed the whole base from last episode and made it here. That is kinda dumb, kinda silly, and very, very lazy. But worry not, I will be making all the sciences all over again later this episode, because otherwise this would be even dumber. However, as mining drones don't exist, and my starter patches are low, it's about time I do some more expansion. I set up an iron outpost first, as it is where I'm lowest in resources, setting up a train line to bring it back to the base. The other resources are not as low, but some of them are kinda buried under my trash. So I'm temporarily installing Peppermint mining to make my robots mine the resources. Mostly just because they make the map view ugly and I don't want to waste resources. With that sorted, I wait by the labs as I want to see what sciences are crafted first, as this base is still building itself out of those cargo wagon malls. Black science is already done by the time I get there, and my guess for what ones will show up in order is black because it's already there, then red, then green, then blue, as that just makes sense. However, it ends up being red, blue, green instead. Guess green was just not well liked by the robots or something. After waiting there for a while, I start setting up train stops for the other resources, as I will need them eventually. This all done, however, I realize you probably don't want to look at this dumb base anymore. Otherwise, you would have watched the last video I made. And so, I'm gonna work on something different. Something grander. Something a bit silly. And something that made my playtime for this video go from 30-ish hours to over 100. The first step into this project was the complete eradication of every biter I could get my hands on. I managed to push the biters on my convenient little island up to this top little area that's easy to just wall off. But this just took me a couple hours, so what did I do for the next few days? Well, I made the real base. See, when it came to building a proper base in Factorio, there's two main factions it seems. The bus folk and the city block doers. Main bus is good, but I do that all the time, and according to some, not very well. City blocks are effective and efficient and very easy to expand. Too easy, in fact. I tried to build a city block design once while playing a space exploration run with my friend, and nearly died of boredom. So yeah, I won't be doing that either. But if that's the case, what am I doing? Well, I will be building the rib cage. It is kind of almost a city block design. The center two rails, or the spine, is where the trains will go when they're on the way to train stops. Then, they split off these junctions, or vertebrae, to the rib rails where the trains park to either deposit or pick up items. Then, when done at a stop, they run onto these elevated tracks along the ribs to loop back up to the top. Now, is this the design the most efficient? No. Is it the best in some other weird way? Not really. But what it is unique. And not boring. Some Factorio players may look at this and wonder why I didn't just run dedicated lines for different materials, and that is because of one, maybe dumb reason. You see, I didn't want to just have dedicated trains, as with 2.0 and the new interrupts, I can make them all able to access any stop. So, a train coming out from dropping iron gears can go then pick up iron ore and deposit it at the mines, and then go pick up green circuits and deposit it for red circuits. Now this may not be the smart way of doing this, but it is quite intriguing. While I could go on for about an hour, maybe longer, about the exact way this base works, if I was gonna do that, I'd probably make a dedicated video for it. So I guess if you want me to do that, ask nicely or something. So instead, let's get into making stuff. First goal, red science. This requires iron gears, which is easy as it just takes iron plates from the iron rib, and copper plates, which is from the copper rib. Now, I decided to standardize this base to around 3 belts of outputs where reasonable. So I will be making 45 science per second, or about 2,700 per minute. I definitely, for sure, will not regret this decision. That was definitely made with thought and reason, and definitely not just completely spontaneously for no real reason. But this is the decision that was made, and that is a lot of science, which means it's a good idea. And that means also that even for something like red science, it's gonna be a lot of science assemblers. But surely I will find a good, pleasing way to fit all those assemblers into a rib. Oh my god. Between the super thick steel build growing like a tumor out of the left side of the rib cage, and the bar of red science that looks kinda whack, remind me to never ever build like that again. But anyway, leaving that abomination behind and continuing down the rib cage, I need green science. Green science just takes belts, which I can get its gears from the red science gear rib, and also yellow inserters, which do take green circuits, but all builds go up pretty fast. Now, while building green science, I know it takes more assemblers than red science, but not wanting a horrible bar thing again, I decide to just make a very thick rib gap, and it looks infinitely better. While building down to make more iron forges, however, I quickly realize that I'm going to need more room than just down can provide. So of course, I fuse another ribcage onto my ribcage, as well as adding a rail at the bottom to fuse the two spines together, which I call a pelvis from here on out. Next science on the chopping block is military science, which despite having to make a stone mine and a stone brick forge, isn't too bad. First build is yellow ammo, which is just a copy-paste of the iron gear build, which you can probably tell due to that one gear assembler in the middle. Then, I make red ammo, which while a bit bigger is also quite easy, just the yellow ammo, some steel, and some copper. Next up is walls, which is just stone bricks, so quite easy, just requires a lot of throughput. And similarly, grenades is just iron plates and coal, and goes up quite neatly. And, while chunky, military science is a classic 3 input, 1 output Factorio recipe, so nothing crazy here. With military science done, this is where the regret starts seeping in. See, while blue science is not the most complex things ever, it takes a pretty big chunk of industry. And despite the fact that it looks like I have plenty of room to build, I really don't. That is because cliffs exist. And also the weird, red science bar and steel tumor that makes it really hard to build anywhere up there, but that's besides the point. But, for some godforsaken reason, the devs decided to lock cliff explosives behind Vulcanus. So I'm stuck with them for a while. And that means I cannot build anything in an area that cliffs are, so my building area is much more limited than the open world would imply. This immediately becomes a problem, as just for the engines for blue science, I need a cool 600 assembling machines. After some deliberation, where I am putting that is down. So flipping the pelvis junction into a full crossroad, I start putting a new ribcage below it as well. And down here, I make my engines. Not too bad, but kind of enormous. And right next to that, oil processing. That is even bigger, and much more annoying, but it works. Though, since I'm using advanced oil processing, I can't forget the cracking ribs. Setting these to lowest priority should stop them from being used unless necessary, so having them in separate areas shouldn't cause any issues. Red circuits, while they do take a lot of materials to make, and I will one day need to make like 3,000 more, go up pretty easy. And for ease of signals for the ribcage, go up before plastic. But plastic goes up right after. And last but very least effort for blue science is sulfur. Just petroleum train and water pipe in, sulfur out. And yes, I'm piping water because with the new fluid mechanics, there's pretty much zero reason for water to ever be in a train. So last on the blue science journey is the blue science block itself. It is pretty massive, 720 assembling machines massive. But once again, just 3 input, 1 output recipe, so pretty simple otherwise. With the 4 simple sciences out of the way, next is purple science, which is going to be the easiest yet. Or so I thought. Since I already have the items needed to make the items for purple science in the ribs, it should be easy. First item is productivity modules, just a bunch of red and green circuits, so while very, very expensive, not all that bad to make. Next, electric furnaces. And you get the deal, 3 input, 1 output. Still red circuits though, so a bit expensive. And then, last, and very much most annoying, is rails. The recipe is so simple. However, I need so much throughput that I have to cobble together a garbage blue belt setup in the old base just to get enough stuff flowing in, because I need 15 yellow belts worth of stone, steel, and iron sticks each in this one rib. And that is a lot. I had to sit here for like an hour just for the belts to finish, but in the end, it is done. Then I just need to put it together, which would be easy if I didn't need 30 yellow belts worth of rails flowing in. So, more blue belts means more waiting, means more agony. But purple science is done, and now just one more science for this video. Real quick before working on yellow science, however, I do take a moment to set up labs in the new base. This design will be completely overhauled in the future, but so will most ribs in this base, so what of it. Last, and most annoying science I build, front to back, yellow science. The yellow science rib itself is simple, 3 input, 1 output, and no crazy throughput requirements, so at least this part goes down fast. Next product I accidentally build off camera, low density structure. Though besides for its insane copper requirements, it's just another 3 input, 1 output build. After that is blue circuits. And yeah, another thing to just drink my red and green circuits, which are already very behind. Other than that, it also takes some sulfuric acid, but otherwise it is simple, just expensive. Then we got the big one for Yellow Science, flying robot frames. Not only does it take 2 ingredients we have not made yet, it's also the only 4 input, 1 output build so far, which means I need a spare vertebrae down here just for the output train to sit on. But I suppose other than that, the build itself could be a lot worse. First of those extra intermediates I need is batteries, which are easy, just some sulfuric acid as well as some copper and iron plates, so the build is easy. The other is electric engines, and they kinda suck. Similar to blue circuits, they are an assembling machine product with a fluid input, meaning I can't make it as dense, and they also take engines and green circuits, the circuits of which I'm going to be very behind on, for a long time. This is because, with my current rib designs and no modules or anything, I would need 118 ribs just for copper wire. I'd also need 92 for iron plates and 82 for copper plates, and this is the reason making this base now might not have been a good idea, but also might have been kinda smart. See, with the base built up how it is not reasonable to actually build that many production areas. However, once I get to space and to other planets, things will change. For example, on Vulcanus, I'm gonna get the Foundry, which will effectively remove the need for electric furnaces, and on top of that, is much faster and has an inbuilt productivity bonus of 50%, meaning the amount of ribs I will need for Foundry products will be vastly reduced. Then, when I go to Fulgora, I'm under the belief that I will get a comparable boon to my circuit boards, as well as the ability to get quality items easier, and Gleba. So as I go to other planets, I will unlock ways to make this base here more feasible and less stupid. So, I guess you'll just have to come back and see me make this mess into a more properly effective base that can make the 2700 SPM I built it to make. But I guess we will have to see next time. What do you mean that's somebody's outro already?